So domain 3 is communication, right? And I think we all understand what communication is, but I don't think we all do it effectively, right? I think, it seems counterintuitive, but really the most effective communication is less about talking and more about listening. And I think that's something that we really need to be able to sort of acknowledge and take to heart in how we do our work, right? Because this is human services work, and being able to sort of communicate and really relate to others is the most human thing that we can do, right? So if we don't do that well, I think we're losing the human out of human services.
I think domain 3 communication is super important in the work that we do in prevention. Whether you're working with coalitions and facilitating meetings where you're bringing people together to kind of bridge some of those gaps that people have in the ways they communicate. Also, if you're teaching a curriculum or walking folks through some kind of direct programming, being able to communicate and setting that stage for people communicating safely, respectfully, healthily is so important to the work that we do, I think, in prevention.
I think about communication much more on sort of an interpersonal level. How are we able to communicate with all the partners, right? This is work that requires partners. And I think if we can't relate to those partners, if we can't communicate effectively with those partners, why would they stick around, right? Why would they work with us? And so I think communication serves to, one, relay information, but that's like the most basic form of information, right? We're just gonna relay, exchange information about what it is that we're doing. And people have that everywhere. Every single day, you're getting information about things happening around you. How do we distinguish sort of what it is that we do from everything else? I think it's the relationships that we build. I think if we think about communications purely as transactional, anyone can do that, right? I can put together a poster and send it out there. That's not necessarily going to mean my work is more effective than anyone else's.
So some of the ways that I would choose, I was looking for how is this message going to most effectively reach the audience I'm hoping to reach. Some of that would, of course, be hearing from that audience directly, right? So I don't ever want to just make a decision on my own that this is something that's going to reach, X group of people. I want to make sure that I'm hearing from members of that group about where they're at. So I do a lot of work with youth. So I know that in 2021, I'm not going to share that message on Facebook, right? That's where I'm going to get their parents, which may be helpful, right? That's maybe a message I want to send, and often is, but that's not where I'm going to go if I want to reach youth directly. And I didn't come to that, just like happen upon that, right? That's from, hearing from young people say, here's the most effective ways to reach me. Like, no, I don't ever use that. Okay, yes, I do use this. But so making sure I'm listening to the folks who are the people I want to communicate with, and then also looking at studies around certain interventions. So looking at the data, especially around media interventions, things that are meant to be at that kind of big messaging level to really reinforce maybe some of the one-on-one work that people are getting. So there should be some great data from whoever originated that intervention around where has it been most effective and what questions to ask to make sure that in my community it's going to be as effective and get the outcomes I'm looking for.
Going into a community where you felt that you did not at all reflect that or represent that community, you look nothing like that community, right? Let's just say I'm a person of color and I'm walking into a community that's primarily white. Right, and I feel like, gosh, it's going to be really hard to relate to these folks because I don't feel just sort of at first glance that we share any sort of commonalities, and that you got to remind yourself that's never true. I think we need to make sure that we don't get caught up in sort of like the physical appearances that people are trying to serve, and because I think that prevents us from getting deeper. Because I think you don't have to go that deep with folks to realize that we all have common struggles. If you think about addiction, right? Like you look at someone struggling with substance use, and that's where you stop. Yeah, if you're not struggling with substance use, of course, I don't know how we relate. But that person might be a brother. Oh, I'm a brother too, right? That person might be a father. Oh, I'm a father too. All of a sudden now there are these points of connection, and I think understanding that and really kind of focusing on that can help you connect to a group of folks that you might not feel at first glance that you can relate to, right? And so I think if you're someone walking into a space like that, I think one, reminding yourself of that, right? Don't stop at the skin deep. Go deeper than that.
One of the ways in which cultural humility comes into communication would be kind of learning some of the big picture styles of communication that certain groups that you're working with might have. And then also learning, okay, how does that individual communicate? So it's a little bit of being open to kind of taking in new knowledge, seeking out that knowledge, but then also being, okay, like watching the room, really kind of feeling what's happening between these folks and how can I most effectively help them, you know, come to the same page in some way. So I think, you know, being open as a listener, and then also that kind of directly seeking out information. I know even just when I think about working with folks from different geographic areas in the US, I am a fast New England talker, and I know that that's not going to be the most effective way to communicate with certain groups. And so that's something that you know, I didn't know naturally. I had to learn that from others, and sometimes that's like taking some feedback from people saying, hey, I like what you're saying, but it sounds like you're on a freight train barreling down the tracks, and I want to hear more and I can't.
Part of our culture is, especially in public health, is always having to have the answer, and I think we need to push back against that. You know, I don't think it's about having the right answer, it's being able to ask the right questions, right? I don't think people come to these spaces because they already know the answers, right? And I think sometimes we put pressure on ourselves to have the right answer, and we do that in a way that we stop listening, right? So I think if you come into a space and you're just honest with where you're coming from and you're prepared to listen, I think that can break down a lot of barriers that often are just perceived, right? And I think that's cultural responsiveness. I think that's how you take cultural competency, which is at the center of the SPIF, the Strategic Prevention Framework, and actually put that into action.